Joe. Let's show the room the difference in size between an NFL tight end and a Division III strong safety.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I think I feel a little more like Danny DeVito in Twins.
Okay. So I'm Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, you
I like
are.
it.
Yeah.
I like it, man. Thank you,
right.
Joe.
Great job.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Well, good morning. How y'all doing? You excited to be here? Man, I'm so excited to be here. Now, let's start this off on the right note. Scott wants all of you to have a true NFL experience. So after the presentation, I will be in the Great Hall, and if you want, I will hit you as hard as I possibly can. My career ended due to concussion, and I believe every one of you should experience at least one concussion in your... No, I'm just kidding. We don't want that. You got to remember, though, there's no HR in football. There's no HR in football. And that's so funny. Every time I step on stage, it's still a mystery to me how I went from one career where my job was to hit people for a living to a second career where my job is to care about people for a living. How does that work? But can you imagine? Can you imagine if we could actually incorporate full contact accountability into our performance metrics in the workplace? Like if Josh Koza at EPI doesn't reach his KPI, just like the ESPN commercial, I'll come flying out of nowhere and just tag him with full equipment on. Wouldn't that be awesome? Oh man, it's great to be here. Most importantly, with the wonderful story that I've had in my journey into this wonderful world of culture transformation is I am a family man. And the good Lord in all of his wisdom thought that I should be blessed with 4 daughters. So pray for me, like please, every day, like good thoughts. It's why I love to travel so much, to be honest with you, right? So I'm so thankful that you've invited me to be here. But I've learned more about myself as a man being surrounded by these incredible, incredible women. The Champions Creed is the foundation of culture. And it all started for me with one man practicing a chosen, objective, defined belief system to not only transform the value of an organization, but more importantly, to transform every single player that stepped foot into that locker room. And that was Tony Dungy. See, Tony Dungy was the first to teach me that culture doesn't have to be subjective. It's one of the most talked about themes in business, but it's one of the most undeveloped and unpracticed applications that we have, right? Culture doesn't have to be subjective. Culture can be an objective strategy that builds a powerful system that we can practice in the workplace to actually turn our culture into a product. He taught me that you will always have a culture by design or default. You're always going to have one. You're always going to have culture because culture comes out of the beliefs and behaviors of the community. So if you're always going to have one, why not design it? Why not design it? Why not see it as the product that it is? So what I want to do today is just take you on a journey. I want to take you on a journey that addresses some misconceptions, but inspires you to look at culture through a unique lens. And then at the end, to show you how we've actually applied it to the CEPA community. So let's start with the misconceptions. Every time I step into a boardroom, I have to deal with the misconception that culture is just the soft skills. I want to inspire you today to realize that there's nothing more metallic and hard than culture because it's directly connected to the most important asset in any company, and that is your people. That is your people. Culture is not a soft variable. And the data now, the 30 to 40 years of engagement data that has come out of Gallup and McKinsey and Deloitte and Korn Ferry has given us an objective platform now to understand that culture drives performance and productivity and revenue, ultimately having a huge impact on enterprise value. Let's look at these 3 profound statements that McKinsey makes in a recent report. Culture misalignment slows value capture and hurts integration performance. It's why PwC, Harvard Business, McKinsey, Deloitte, they all agree that the number one reason why M&A fails is culture misalignment. Strong culture integration can drive vastly improved returns. And how about this last one? Believe it or not? Transformational culture integration value can increase acquisition returns by at least 30%. We're not talking about soft skills. We're not talking only about emotional and relational equity in a company. We're talking about the ability to increase retention and lower turnover, to increase performance and productivity, which ultimately increases profitability. Lowering the risk when you step into the opportunity to help an organization exit. So just as an example, this is hypothetical, but just as an example, if we were to be able to increase revenue by 10% because we have a culture, strategy, and system in place to take a base case company at 40 million in revenue to 44 million in revenue. And if we cut that 30%, that objective truth that McKinsey gives us, in half, right? This illustration is 16.7% increase in enterprise value. If we could use culture to increase our revenue and have an impact on the EBITDA and the multiplier of the organization, we have an opportunity to multiply the enterprise value, because we've seen culture as a product that can scale across an organization, positively transforming every single person that steps in to that workplace. Culture matters. Culture matters. And I want to take you on this journey through the Indianapolis Colts championship season to show you how simply profound practices led to creating one of the strongest NFL teams in history. You ready to go? Yeah. All right, here we go. It's February 4th of 2007. There was a cool Miami, Florida mist filling the Dolphin Stadium for Super Bowl 41. One of only 2 Super Bowls in the history of football to rain. And I can tell you right now, when you're losing in the rain, it sucks. It sucks. Because all the water and all the mud gets into all the wrong places, and it's uncomfortable. But man, when you're winning in the rain, there's nothing like it. It's like being whisked back in time to when you're in the backyard on a rainy day playing with your buddies. It doesn't matter where the water goes. It doesn't matter where the mud goes. Prince played at halftime. Do y'all remember this against the Chicago Bears? Prince played at halftime. He sang Purple Rain in the rain. You can't ask for something more magical. It's one of the greatest Super Bowl, it was voted as one of the greatest Super Bowl halftimes ever. If you've never seen it, go on YouTube and watch it. It's unbelievable. I'll never forget, the Colts were in the tunnel, and the referee had his arms up, holding back the Colts. All of a sudden, he got the signal to release the Colts. He dropped his hands, and like a stampede, we came out of that tunnel. My foot planted firmly on that freshly cut Bermuda grass, and I heard a familiar voice from behind me shouting my name, Ben! Ben! And you guys, I turned, and there's my dad. My dad had fought his way halfway around the stadium to be in this exact position. And he was in the craziest downward dog yoga position, holding his hand down, reaching out for me. And wouldn't you believe, in that moment, I put my hand up and I shooed my dad away. Like a pesky fly. I was like, Dad, this is not the time. Like, this is the Super Bowl. I got to go to work. This is not the time. And I took one more step onto that field, and it was like, oh, the fist of God just sucker punched me. I stopped in my tracks, and I felt this inner voice say to me, Ben, go back to your father. Go back to where this entire journey began. And I'm so glad that I listened to that voice. I sprinted back into the tunnel. My dad had already started to walk up the stairs. I began shouting, "Dad, Dad!" And he heard my voice, thank goodness. He came back, got into that same crazy position, and I'm telling you, it was a cinematic moment. Life slowed down. And my dad reached down to me, and I reached up and I grabbed his hand, and we both lost it. We both lost it. And I looked at my dad, tears in my eyes, and I said, "Dad, I love you. It all started with you." And it did. It started with my dad in the backyard of Rochester, Minnesota, where he would get on his knees and he'd let this 4-year-old kid run into him with all of his might, and he'd pretend to get blown up and fall back on the ground. And he planted the seed. He planted the passion through a belief and through a value into my heart and into my life that would forever change the trajectory of my life. We've all been in that situation. We're in that situation every day in the workplace where we're confronted with the things that are most important, with the things of the world sometimes that can distract us from that. And I'm so glad in this moment I had a chance to go back and choose the right path. You see, my dad was a special man. My dad has been a pastor for 50 years, and he had a creed that he gave to me. And a creed is defined as a set of beliefs that guide the behaviors and actions of people. And this was my dad's creed. Like I said, he was a pastor, so he always started with this. You have to play for a purpose bigger than yourself. Purpose is the foundation, right? So he would always say, "Ben, you got to honor God." Now, that's going to be different for everybody in the room. What is that purpose? But you've got to find something that you believe in that's bigger than yourself, because playing for a purpose bigger than yourself produces greatness. Ben, I believe you have to work harder than everybody else because hard work develops talent and character. Ben, never, ever stop improving because I believe there's always somebody right behind you that wants to take your position. And Ben, most importantly, have fun. Have fun because I believe if you don't love it, then what's the point? Now, I'm sure if we spent some time together, every single one of you in this room can think of foundational beliefs and values that have been given to you from parents or teachers or coaches, or right, that have molded you and have driven you on the road to success that you're on currently today. And it all comes down to one thing, and it's about creating a culture that pours purpose into people. And this is what the objective data through the engagement surveys is all about. If we can create cultures that pour value, significance into people, then you enhance the purpose of their life and they give you everything that they've got. That's how you increase performance and productivity. But first, let's start with, what does the academia say? What does organizational psychology actually say culture is? Dr. Edgar Schein is known as the godfather of culture. And he says that every culture in the world comes out of the espoused beliefs, assumptions, and artifacts of the community. The foundation of culture is belief. The value principles that we choose to represent our cultures, that we put onto our websites, are artifacts of those foundational beliefs. Right? You have to believe that being honest and doing the right thing is essential in order to choose integrity as the core value that represents that. But friends, within the belief structure is the ability to make culture your strategy and create the systems out of that you can practice in order to achieve the transformational scaling outcomes that you absolutely want, right? So how do we make that memorable? I worked with Dr. Dan Zismer at the University of Minnesota, sociologist, to make a definition for culture that's memorable. It's important for us to be able to remember and to be able to recycle. So culture is what we believe, why we believe, right? That's the Simon Sinek, the power of why, gives us knowledge and understanding. And then most importantly, how. How do we choose to behave? Because at the end of the day, you can have all the wisdom in the world, but if you don't put it into action, if you don't execute, and you know better than everyone being in this industry that execution is key to success. We've got to execute, right? So how do we choose to behave comes down to how we practice culture. How we practice culture. And one thing I want you to remember, I want you to learn, is that culture often feels like a boulder. It feels like this huge weight that we're carrying, and we don't really know what to do with it. And so we throw it in the pond, but culture is actually a pebble game. It's about the constant tossing of pebbles into a pond, creating a ripple effect over a ripple effect that ultimately spreads across the organization. So let's talk just for a moment about practice. Let me give you some really unbelievable data that comes out of the NFL, right? For every 280 hours an NFL player practices, they perform for 1 hour. Can you believe that? For every 280 hours an NFL player practices, they perform for 1 hour. Let's break that down into game statistics. On average, in an NFL game, you have between 65 and 75 offensive plays. Each play lasts between 5.5 and 6 seconds. So if you're a starter and you never leave the field, the only amount of time you actually perform from the snap of the ball to the blow of the whistle when the play is dead is between 9 and 11 minutes. Isn't that crazy? We sit back and we watch these 3-hour NFL productions, but the most amount of time that you'll actually execute is between 9 and 11 minutes, even though you spend 16 hours practicing on a field in preparation for every game. What does Gallup tell us about the practicability measures of human development in the workplace? For every 40 hours of work, an employee is lucky to get between 30 and 60 minutes of human development practice. Now, we're never going to be able to replicate the NFL ratio, right? It's impossible. We're never going to be able to replicate that. But what if we can make an adjustment? What if that 30 to 60 minutes becomes 90 to 120 minutes a month? And those 90 to 120 minutes are intentional and thoughtful and part of a strategy and a system to develop your people towards the core beliefs and values of the company. Right? You're pouring into your people. You're giving them more value, significance, and purpose so that they give you more devotion and more commitment to their job and to their role. That's what happened, believe it or not, in an NFL locker room. So this is the blueprint of a winning culture that Tony Dungy created. And it was built around 4 foundational core values, but that were supported through a belief, strategy, and system to simply and profoundly practice in order to develop us as players. Listening, learning, language, and love. Love was basically value and respect. How do you value and respect your team members? So I'm just going to walk you through 2 to give you the framework of how we practice it. So first was following that definition of what, why, and how. We wanted to make culture objective. We wanted to create culture alignment around our core beliefs and values. So listening, the core value of listening, right? We all believe that it's to take notice of and act on what someone says, right? Why is it important? The power of why. We as humans have an innate desire to be heard and to be understood, right? So listening to each team member allows us to develop unique strengths and creates an environment of growth and respect. How was this practiced in Indianapolis? If I were to ask you a question, what's the most important thing that happens at the beginning of every single NFL play that leads to a potential score? What's the most important thing that happens at the beginning of every single play that leads to a potential score? Anybody? Julie Keys. You've heard me. She had me on her podcast. So she already asked this question, so she knows the answer. It's the huddle, right? It's the huddle. How many of you have ever stopped the football party and told people to shut up so you can watch the huddle? No, right? It doesn't happen. It's mundane. You don't think about it. But we actually had an objective culture of the huddle. And the system was stop, look, and care. Stop was the act of selflessness. So our offensive coordinator said, the minute that Peyton Manning steps into the huddle, everything stops. Everything stops. You give the leader the stage of speech. Second is look. Look is active listening. It's the pursuit of information. So not only were we told to look at Peyton, we were told to use multiple senses and look directly at his mouth. Because in front of 80,000 people, you might not hear every word that's coming. So we want you to use your eyesight to look at the words that he's forming with his mouth to try to gain as much information as possible so that we can be on the same page. Stop, look, and most importantly, care. Care is the foundation of empathy, the ability to put yourself in the position of the person you're working alongside with. If I'm not empathetic towards the role and responsibilities of the other 10 offensive players, I can't do my job as a tight end to the best of my ability. It was so important in Indianapolis that the first 5 minutes of our team practice started with a 5-minute period where we would practice getting in and out of the huddle and going through stop, look, and care. Can you believe that? The greatest athletes in the world in this sport, running out onto the field for 5 minutes, getting into the huddle and just going through our belief system. They wanted it to become second nature. Do you know that we were actually evaluated in our post-game evaluations? Right? One of our KPIs was being held accountable for where we're looking. And how did they do that? The blue line down the middle of the white helmet. Do you see it? Look at how all the offensive linemen, look at where that blue line is. Look at where that blue line is. The only reason why Reggie Wayne, all-pro receiver, 87, and Hall of Famer Marvin Harrison, number 88, the only reason why they're exiting is because, as you may know, if you're a football fan, Peyton Manning had the craziest audible system, right, in NFL history, and so they would just need to hear where they were supposed to line up, and then they would go to their position, and Peyton would direct them from the line of scrimmage. But it was so important, our culture of the huddle was so important that they evaluated us on where we were looking after every single play, right? So this is a great example of how we took a belief in the power of listening, identified it as a core value, and then created a simply profound way that we practiced it so that it became a part of the nature of the Indianapolis Colts, right? We all have huddles in our life, in the workplace and at home. What does your huddle look like at home? What does your huddle look like with the people that you care most about? Here's mine. There they are, the ladies that run my life in the best way. My wife calls our house the estrogen ocean, and I'm just a boy buoy trying to keep his head above water. But man, I love it, and I can tell you that I try to bring these workplace practices home. I try to practice stop, look, and care at home, and there's a massive difference. When my 10-year-old runs in after having an exciting day in 5th grade, and she walks into my office, and I'm busy at my computer, and she starts to talk to me, and I stay on my email, and I'm talking to her out of the side of my mouth, and I'm saying, honey, I got some work to do. It's amazing to see how her body language changes, almost like she feels defeated as she leaves the office. But when I do a good job of practicing that belief, and she comes in, and I put my laptop down, and I turn in my chair, and I pursue her, and I have empathy towards the experiences that she's had in the day, that relationship comes to life. She lights up. She walks out happier than when she came into the office, right? These types of practices not only can impact us in the workplace, but they can impact us at home as well. How about language, communication? We know how important communication is in the workplace, but it took it to a whole nother level in the Peyton Manning offense, right? Down to the single word that was used. So what did we believe about language? It's the principal method of human communication consisting of words used in a structured and conventional way. Words were so critical in the language of Manning. We would have weekly meetings where Peyton would come in with his 3 to 4 inch thick workbook of all of the different code words and code symbols. See, you have to realize for every single play, right, for every single route, for every single run play, Peyton had 3 different code words. So if the defense caught on to the first, he could go to the second. If they caught on to the second, he could go to the third. He had 3 different hand signals for every single route and every single run play for the same reasons. The same guy that you see on the commercials with his brother that's funny. It was the same guy who was in the huddle. For example, as a tight end, one of my primary routes is a dig route where you run 15 yards straight up the field, 90-degree angle across the middle of the field. And so Peyton, in his humor, came up with 3 hand signals for the dig route, and they were, he would either dig in his nose, okay? He would dig in the front of his pants, or he would dig in the back of his pants, okay? And I'll tell you, when I was on the end of the line of scrimmage, and he was making those audibles, and I would look back at him to see what he would want me to run, he'd always have this funny little smile and go, so he loved to have fun on the field, which decreased some of the stress and pressure sometimes. But words matter. In our human condition, we often communicate out of assumption. I'm communicating out of assumption to you right now. I'm assuming that the words that are coming out of my mouth, you are going to receive exactly the way that I want you to, but there's no way that I can do that. But in the language of Manning, in the Peyton Manning system, every single word mattered. And every single player had to understand exactly what Peyton meant with every single word that he used. So, I'm going to bring you into the huddle here for the next 2 minutes. I want you to listen to the words of Peyton Manning and see if you can figure anything out.
We're going dice right, ice cream, alert, 654, Jose. Okay, 1-0.
Peyton Manning and the Colts run the NFL's most sophisticated offense.
255.
Each play can be called or changed at the line. That forces the Colts linemen to wait
Chocolate.
and wait until Peyton finally makes up his mind.
Hot.
I wonder if they ever think, just snap the ball.
Check it. Brown, Richmond, 96 double. 96 double. Check, oh, what a flare.
His goal is not to get the perfect play. It's to get out of a bad play.
Hot.
And more times than not, they do that.
Peyton drops, looks, fires, touchdown, Reggie Wayne!
It's a ballet that drives people crazy. You know, as you say, just snap the ball. They'll do it when they're well pleased.
Check. One left. Trick. One left.
It started way back, I guess around my second year with Tom Moore. We kind of sat down and just put some code words together and things that kind of made sense. But it has taken off from that.
That's right. Short ox. Richmond, Florida, Buffalo, 97 double. Louisville Soul Train. Big purple, Buddha Raiders.
It's not about trickery.
Purple, Buddha Raiders.
But it does take constant communication.
Okay, he's lying. It was totally about trickery. But every single word mattered. So let's start from the beginning. As we were in the huddle and coming out of the huddle, he said, dice right, ice cream, alert, 654 Jose on nothing. It's a real play. That's a real play. Dice right, ice cream, alert, 654 Jose on nothing. But there's one word in the delivery that is the most meaningful. What was the word? Ice cream important, not the word. Jose also important, not the word. Nothing. It was the last word that he threw onto the end of the delivery. Dice right, ice cream, alert, 654 Jose on nothing. And nothing told us that the play didn't exist. Nothing told us that he was going to try to draw the defense offsides. So when he said nothing, he was telling us, men, when you get to the line of scrimmage, don't move. Don't move. Let me do my thing and see if I can get the defense to jump off sides. Ice cream was an application to remind us not to move. So when we got to the line of scrimmage, the rule was he could choose to give us any flavor of ice cream as a reminder that the play is on nothing, which is why you might have heard chocolate. That's reminding us, guys, remember the play's on nothing, don't move. So he gets under all-pro center Jeff Saturday. He said, hut. The defense doesn't jump off sides, but the safeties shift, telling the master chess player exactly what the defensive secondary is going to do. So now he wipes the entire board clean to present us with a play that he believes is going to win. Brown Richmond, he begins shouting to the offensive lineman. Brown Richmond is the pass protection, telling every single offensive lineman exactly who they're supposed to block so that he doesn't get sacked. Then he looks to the 3 receivers on the right. 96 right double, telling all 3 receivers to run 5-yard quick out routes to the sideline. And if they can't hear him, he's also giving them the hand signal for the route. Then he comes back and he looks at our running back, Dominic Rhodes, and he says, flare, run a flare. A flare is called a safety route. It's a wide bending route to the sideline so that if nobody else is open, he can come back to the safety route on the sideline. And then just before he got back under center Jeff Saturday, I don't know if you even saw it, he gave a little hand signal like this to all-pro receiver Reggie Wayne on the left to run a slant route. 3 steps straight up the field, 45-degree angle into the end zone. All of this language, every single word meaning something very specific so that everybody is in alignment on what leadership expects and what leadership wants. Knowing the whole time he was going to throw it to Reggie Wayne on the backside with a slant route. Said, hut. Safeties shifted, leaving the receiver one-on-one on the backside. Touchdown. And that happened 65 to 75 times a game, so I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted just thinking about it. But it was such a powerful learning experience for me to teach me about how important communication really is. And the better we can answer these 3 questions, the more clarity we can bring into the workplace, right? It comes down to content, purpose, and delivery. What are you saying? Why are you saying it? And how are you saying it? These are very important questions to ask yourself, right? You really have to understand what you're trying to get across, right? Developing out the why is what's going to allow you to help your team members truly understand it. And the delivery is understanding who you're talking to, right? We get into different groups and different communities that can experience language differently, right? So how are we actually going to deliver that is incredibly critical. What does it look like when we don't practice this well? What does that look like in our personal relationships? Has anybody ever rushed into something emotionally and gotten the stink eye because of it, huh? Anybody accidentally say something too quickly without thinking? Yeah? This is what it looks like in my house. I did not think critically about what I said about her frozen Anna dress. And she gave me the stink eye, right? I didn't think about what I was saying and why I was saying and how I was saying it. But when I do that well with my family, I have the opportunity to pour life into my family. My relationship with them increases because I'm truly communicating with them in a language that they understand and that they mean. What does that look like in the workplace? How can we ensure stronger communication that has more clarity so that we are in alignment on what the execution expectations truly are? And friends, it really does come down to really buying into this concept that if we can create a culture of purpose, if we can pour value and significance into people, right, then our greatest asset is going to be developed and reach the potential that we desire. And that's going to have a huge impact on the organization and its profitability. There were 2 really profound acronyms that described the championship culture in Indianapolis. I'll never forget when Tony Dungy walked into that first team meeting room. And he said, "Men, look, if you're sitting in this room today and your entire identity is wrapped up in a sport, you've completely missed the purpose of your life." Whoa. I had never heard a coach say anything like that. If you're sitting in this room and your entire identity is as a football player, you've totally missed the purpose of your life. He said, "Men, my job here is to win. We have to win. But more importantly, my job is to build a family." And the acronym for family in football is forget about me, I love you. Right? that we're going to build this team around a foundation of humility and selflessness. And if you think about it, he's saying that to 53 of the most powerful, egotistical men on the planet, right? But that was his goal. How do I take 53 of the most diverse men on the planet and bring them together into one aligned community that's willing to do whatever they can for one another and for the organization? We have the only Super Bowl ring in the history of football to have one of our beliefs and values engraved in the side of the ring, and it was the word faith. It has nothing to do with religion. The acronym was freedom for all individuals to trust and hope in one another. If he could take 53 of these men and get them to trust and hope in each other, then he's just created the strongest team possible in order to be successful on the field. And it really ultimately comes down to 4 Ds of culture that I want you to understand that will help you bring a strategy and system into the organizations that you're working with or yours, right? Number 1, we have to define culture better. We have to define it better. And my challenge to you would be, if the only thing that defines your culture are 4 to 6 values hidden away on a website with an inspirational statement, you're just scratching the surface, right? We've got to go deeper. And that is what a culture creed does. That's what we built out for the first time ever in the CEPA community, which you'll have an opportunity to see. At True North Private Equity, for example, we have 8 core value principles that were hidden away on a website. When I came in as the Chief Culture Officer, within the first month, that turned into a 32-page culture onboarding and educational training manual that we use in pre-screening, hiring, onboarding, and human development, and even business development, because it becomes our differentiator. We've productized the culture. It sets us apart from everybody else, right? So we have to define our culture. We have to decide how to hire towards culture alignment. We have to be able to develop our team members towards the core beliefs and the values. And very important, we have to be able to listen to what our team members believe about the culture leadership has created in order to empower leadership to make the adjustments in culture over time that are going to actually strengthen and create the culture that is ultimately desired. And most importantly, culture, when you do culture well, not only do you transform the organization, but you transform people's lives. And I'll close with this story. My senior year in college, I was ranked as one of the top tight ends in the country. I was supposed to be the highest drafted player in the University of Minnesota history. 2/3 of the way through my senior season, we're playing our rival, the Wisconsin Badgers. We're at the Exit Planning Institute. You can exit right now, actually. Whoever gave, I'm just kidding. So we're playing the Badgers, always a great rival, always a great rival. I'm told to run a corner route, which is 12 yards straight up the field, 45-degree angle to the corner of the end zone. The ball is snapped, I release, I get to 12 yards, I plant my foot, and I turn to look for the ball. And as I turn, I hear and feel popping all across my lower abdomen. Pop, 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 pop. And all of a sudden, my legs stop working, and I crumble to the turf. But I caught the ball, so still got a highlight of it. But that was the end. That was the end of my college career. I had ended up tearing the abdominal muscles from the pubic bone on both sides. It was a serious injury. 2 months later at the NFL Combine, I discovered that all 32 teams red flagged me as too much of a health risk. So weeks later, as I'm sitting at home in Minnesota with the Minnesota media there, because I was supposed to be this big draft pick out of the University of Minnesota, I sit there for 2 days hearing every single tight end's name called except for mine. I went from being a potential first-round draft pick to not getting drafted at all. It's one of the hardest experiences of my life. I'm driving up to my agent's office, rainy Minnesota day, holding back tears, thinking, what am I going to do? I mean, I had got my college degree, but I put all my eggs in the football basket. And now it was over. 2 months before that day, I had a chance to speak at a huge alumni event at the University of Minnesota in front of about 700 alumni. I get to be the opening speaker for guess who? Tony Dungy. Also a former Gopher quarterback. So I get up in front of all these alumni, coaches sitting right here in front of me. I put the pressure on right away. I say, hey, coach, if you really care about the University of Minnesota, you're going to draft me in the upcoming draft. And he was gracious enough to respond. He came up to the podium and he said, Ben, look, we'd love to have you. We just drafted a first-round tight end last year, Dallas Clark out of Iowa, so we're not really going to be looking for tight ends this year. And then the craziest thing happened, you guys. He stepped back from the podium, put his hand on his chin, as if he was being downloaded something. And he came back to the podium and he said, you know what, Ben? I'm going to make a promise to you in front of all these people. If for some reason you slip through the cracks, if for some reason you don't get drafted, I promise you I'll be the first person to call. So I walk into my agent's office 2 months later, thinking my football career is over. I sit down at the table. All that's left is the free agent market. These are the leftover players. These are the guys that get brought into training camp to give the veterans a break, and rarely do they make a team. 5 seconds after the free agent market opens, the phone in the middle of my agent's desk rings, and I pick it up. And who do you think it was? Tony Dungy. Tony Dungy was the first person to call. And I instantly remembered this promise he made to me in front of 700 people. And it wasn't just Tony Dungy, it was Hall of Fame general manager Bill Polian. Head coaches and GMs are not calling free agents, but they called me. And they said, Ben, look, we didn't think this was going to happen. We saw you slipping through the draft. We know why. And we've had experience with this injury. So here's what we want to do. We want you to be a Colt. We're going to send you to the top surgeon in the country. We don't even want you to play the first year. Just recover and get better. And on top of that, we'll pay you as though you're a playing rookie. What? This is the NFL. What have you done for me lately? Nothing. But here's $230,000 just to rest and recover. And on top of that, we'll give you a $20,000 signing bonus just so that you know we're serious, we care. The miracle in that, friends, is the next year, Dallas Clark, the tight end that they brought in the year before me, goes down with an injury in the last preseason game. So I get to start Sunday night kickoff, national television, against Ray Lewis and the Baltimore Ravens. And I'll tell you, when you see Ray come out of the tunnel in real life, you want to go to the bathroom, okay? But I had the game of my life. I got the game ball. Third quarter rolls around. Peyton sees the coverage. He calls a seam route, which is basically straight down the middle of the field. Said, Hut, I release down the middle of the field. The safety messes up the coverage. He goes and covers somebody else, leaves me wide open. Peyton sees it, comes back, throws, hits me back shoulder, make the adjustment and catch, turn. I'm 10 yards from the end zone. The safety had recovered. He's just standing there. And I knew I had a decision to make. And it was going to hurt. But I was going to get into that end zone. I ran with everything that I had, lowered my shoulder, and barreled through this safety. Touchdown. Very first NFL game. And as I'm getting off the ground, practicing championship culture by stepping on the safety's face, I realized that it was Deion Sanders, arguably the greatest defensive player in NFL history who had come out of retirement for 2 years. So in my very first NFL game, I catch a pass from Hall of Fame quarterback Peyton Manning, and I run through Deion Sanders to score a touchdown. None of it happens. None of it happens without one man practicing a chosen, objective culture by design. And because Dungy understood that, because he designed a culture not only that espoused important beliefs and values like we all do, but a strategy and a system for how to practice and develop that within his players, I can tell you that all 53 players on the active roster were giving 100% devotion and commitment and loyalty to that man, right? Culture matters. Culture matters. And it can not only have an impact on the personal side, but it can have an impact on the value side. Right? This photo was taken directly after we won the Super Bowl. The Lombardi trophy's in the middle of the table. And I just want you to see it because Dungy walks into the locker room. He tells all of the media to put their cameras down. I'm so glad one disobeyed, even though we don't practice disobedience, right? I'm so glad, right? Because it just captured what this team was all about. Before and after every game, we would come together as a team and we would give thanks for football and for this family, right? Which ultimately led to a world championship, which increased the value of the Indianapolis Colts significantly. We have the opportunity to do that as well. So my goal today was to inspire you to look at culture not just as something we talk about, something that we know is important, but look at it as a product and a strategy and a system that you can actually develop and bring into not only your organizations, but as you're advising companies on how to increase their value. This is a value accelerator. And every single one of you in this room has the opportunity to be a champion for your culture and to win. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.